Welcome, creative adventurers. I'm Debbie Cohn with D Cohn Designs. Thank you for stopping by today. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a traditional block. This block is included in the AQuiltingLife.com's Block of the Month for 2022. The block for February 2022 is a traditional block, often known as an hourglass block, but it's also known as a quarter-square triangle with a pinwheel in the center. So let me show you the block. Right here we have February 2022's Block of the Month for A Quilting Life's Block of the Month program, and then this was last month, January's, the traditional sawtooth star. I won't be showing you how to make the churn dash border. For that, you'll want to go to aquiltinglife.com, where Sherry McConnell has a video about that. So let's get started. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and tell a friend, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and leave me a comment. Also, there's a giveaway going on my YouTube channel right now. If you will go to my checkerboard Jelly Roll Race Quilt video and watch that, toward the end it will tell you how to enter the giveaway. I will be giving away 5 free patterns of that Jelly Roll Race Quilt to 5 winners anywhere in the world. I will email you a PDF download of that pattern. So best of luck to you. This video is all about how to make the traditional quarter-square triangle pinwheel block. This block is used in the A Quilting Life Block of the Month for February 2022. As I mentioned in the January 2022 video, I'm choosing Christmas fabrics for my Block of the Month so that by November I'll have a Christmas quilt all ready to go. So for this month, I know the pinwheel section, I want to have this focal fabric, these trees, as the main fabric. And then the surrounding quarter square triangles I'm going to do in the green, and then my background is again my white fabric. I don't mind that my trees will be sideways and upside down in my pinwheel. I think that adds to the charm. Let's get started with the block. In addition to your regular tools, including your rotary cutter, seam ripper, and your regular ruler like this, it may be helpful to have one of these 2 tools, although not necessary. Either the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer, the 1/2" version, this right here, or the 4.5 by 4.5 inch square ruler. This one happens to be OmniGrid. There are several brands out there that would work just fine. Either of these tools could be used to square up your quarter square triangles, but you can do it without it as well, which I'll demonstrate in the video, along with showing you how to use the 4-inch square ruler. Now that I've trimmed my selvages, I'm ready to cut my fabric. For this particular pattern, it calls for 5.5-inch squares of fabric. You'll want to consult the specific pattern that you're using for the dimensions you'll need to cut. You'll either use a ruler like I have here, or you can use your mat and a thinner ruler. I've also anchored my ruler with a hand weight to help make sure that my cuts are accurate and they don't slip. I'm going to turn it the other way, line it up on my mat so it's straight. I'm going to straighten up this other edge right here, and then I will trim over 5.5 inches so that I have a 5.5-inch square. Again, this is just what my pattern calls for. You'll want to consult your pattern for whatever size pieces you'll need for your pattern. Then I measure over with my ruler, 5.5 inches, making sure to line it up both this way and this way. Place my hand weight and cut. If you had a lot of pieces to cut, you could certainly stack or layer the fabrics. Depending on your comfort level, you could double it or even quadruple it. This is the last of the squares that I'll need. I also needed a print square and 2 background squares. Now we can begin the sewing. Once you've cut your squares, the first thing you'll want to do is to lay 1 background square and 1 solid or print square right sides together, and you're going to want to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner. The easiest way I've found, once I've layered them, is to line up the corner there and the corner there on my mat, like that. Then use a ruler and a pencil to mark the diagonal cut line. I offset the ruler just a hair to account for the width of the pencil, and then I draw the line from corner to corner. This represents the cutting line. Next, we're going to do a stitch line on each side, 1/4 of an inch in. So I line up my ruler again, but this time on the pencil line, 1/4 of an inch right here on each side. Here's one side. And for me, I'm using dotted or stitch lines like you would see in a pattern. That helps me remember that that's the stitching line. You could, of course, do solid lines if you'd like, not a problem. Next, I line up my ruler again on the solid line, just scooting it over like that. And then I draw broken lines to remind me this is the stitch line. This is one way to mark the diagonal lines. I'm going to show you another way with the other set of squares. So here's the other set of squares. I'm going to put my print piece right sides together with my background piece, and I'm going to make sure that they're even, like that. Then I'm going to use this other ruler. This is called medium seam marker. I happen to have it from Missouri Star. You can get it other places. And this is handy because you can see there is already a solid line in the middle, and then if I draw on each side of the ruler, then I'll only have to mark the stitch lines because the cutting line doesn't have to be exact. As you can see, the ruler is just a tiny bit short, so what I've done is I've lined up the corners on my mat right there, and I've lined up the corner of the ruler, made sure I positioned it so it's right along that imaginary line from the ruler to the corner. Then I'm going to mark my stitch line. Again, I'm using a broken line to remind me this is the stitch line on both sides of this ruler. Then I slide it down slightly to hit the corner right here. Again, making sure I'm lined up with my broken lines there, right to the corner, and add those couple extra. Then I repeat on the other side. There you have two different ways to mark the stitch and cut lines. There you have two different ways to mark the stitch lines for your half square triangles, which will then be made into quarter square triangles just a little bit later in the video. Okay, now we're ready to stitch on the broken lines. As you can see, I have pinned them, both of them, just to make sure that they stay stable while I stitch. I'm going to chain piece them because I've got two here to do. If you have more, of course, you can chain piece those as well, and it'll go even faster. Now we're going to take it to the iron, cut down the middle with the shears, and then press it back. Now I'm going to trim the threads, and then I'm going to cut in between an approximate 1/4 inch. It doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going to take my shears and cut. I'm aiming for the corners. This one does, so I'll just cut right down on the solid line. Then we're going to take it to the iron and press them gently back, pressing the seam to the dark side. And that will make half square triangles, and then we'll get to the 1/4 square triangle section after that. Let me show you what it looks like so far. We'll be pressing gently, so I'll gently pull it over because these are bias seams, they stretch easily. I'm just gently pressing, I'm not pulling or tugging. And then I will take it to the iron. Again, just gently pressing those triangles back. Here you can see I have pressed my half square triangles back toward the dark side, and I'm ready to repeat the process to make the 1/4 square triangles. At this stage, you want to pay attention to where the placement of your fabrics are. You don't want them like this, touching each other, with the backgrounds touching. You want them rotated opposite, 180 degrees. And I'll show you what I mean. So I've got background in solid and background in print. The reason for that is we're going to do the same thing we did in the earlier step. We will be drawing a diagonal solid cutting line and then stitched lines. So the way to create the 1/4 square triangles, let's say we have our solid line right here, that's our cutting line. When we cut it, Then we will end up with one block that has a solid, a print, and 2 background squares, which is exactly what we want. This is also called the hourglass block. So let's go ahead and mark our squares and stitch. I'm going to use the same procedure as before, where I line up the corners of my block on the mat, and I use a ruler, and I accommodate the width of the pencil just ever so slightly to keep it accurate. This is the cutting line. I'm drawing fairly lightly, but dark enough so that you can see it, like that. And then I'm going to also draw my broken lines to show my stitch lines. Again, I'm lining up my 1/4 inch on my ruler, so it's 1/4 inch is marked right on the line that I just drew, and now I'm drawing broken lines to remind me this is stitching lines, like that, and then on the other side as well. Next, I'm going to pin to hold it stable, and then I'm going to stitch. But I'm actually going to stitch just inside, that means toward the center, just on the inside of the stitch lines. You could, if you have it, you could use diagonal seam tape if you'd like. Although I did not demonstrate it, that is a possibility as well. And I repeat with the other half square triangle blocks. Here you can clearly see where I've stitched just inside the lines. The next thing I'm going to do is take the pins out, of course, and then again cut on the solid line. You can use a rotary cutter or you can use shears. Then we're going to press it back again and then put the 1/4 square triangles together. I'm going to quickly iron. First I'm going to set the seam, just hold it there gently for a moment. Then I'm going to go ahead and press the seam open. The reason for that is there'll be less bulk in the center where you can see the 2 seams come together. I help it out gently with my finger like that. Then I use the nose of the iron to go along the seam, give it a shot of steam, and then press it on the other side as well. And we're ready to square our blocks. Here are the other 3. These are now hourglass or 1/4 square triangle blocks. We're ready to square them up. Let me show you how to do it. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to square up your blocks. First, I'm going to show you the method where you don't need an extra ruler. You're just going to use your regular 2.5 inch ruler. You're going to line your block up on your mat, and it's 4.5 inches. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And you can see I have some extra, almost 1/4 inch there, and just about 1/8 inch there. So I'm going to move my block so I split the difference so that when I cut off each side, it will be even. That's about right. I'm going to lay my ruler down on the 1/2 inch line to exert even pressure and trim. Flip the block around, and this time cut right on the 4.5 inch line because I've cut some of the extra off already on the other side, so that should make it even. There we go. Now I need to do the other side. So I line my block up on the mat so it's even there and there. Then I scoot it over till I see if I need to split the difference, how much extra there is. And there is a little extra on this side here, about 1/8 inch, and about that same much beyond the mat line right there. So it looks pretty good. I'm going to move my ruler to the 1/2 inch mark, line it up, and trim. Flip it around and do the same on the other side, carefully lining up my block with the mat lines. And then at the 1/2 inch mark, I will trim one more time, and that will square up the block. And there's one 4.5 inch 1/4 square triangle block, or also known as the hourglass block. Let me show you another method using a specialty ruler. I happen to have one. This is a 4.5 inch ruler. They come in different brands. What you can do is you would line up your diagonal line on the ruler with one of the diagonal seams on your block, like this, making sure it's lined up, and then slide it down along the diagonal so that you have about the same amount of fabric that's excess on on all sides of the ruler. So I've got about the same amount here, here, over here, and here. Hold it very firmly because it does tend to slide, and then you can trim all the way around, carefully making sure you've got your diagonal lined up right along the seam. Now we're going to line up the ruler to do the other side. So again, I'm lining my diagonal line on my ruler, and I'm butting it up against the corner of the block right there. That's how I'll know how much I have left to trim off. Making sure it's lined up accurately. Rotate the block one last time. Again, lining it up. And trim. And there you have it, another way to trim up your blocks. I'll repeat this process with the other two blocks, then we can begin putting them together into the full block. You may be wondering why I didn't square up the half square triangle blocks before this. The reason I didn't is because in the pattern it clearly says that these blocks are oversized so that they can be trimmed down. So there's no reason to trim twice. Instead, you square up the block at the end, which is what we're doing here. Let's put together our pinwheel quarter square triangle block. The way that I like to remember it is that you want the pinwheel sections, in my case it's the print, in the center. So I start with the bottom left corner, and I want this section, my print, facing down. The next one would be to the left, like this. Then the next one would be pointing up, like this. And then the last one points this way to the right. Pull that down so you can see it. And there we go. The next thing we're going to do is put these together in pairs, like this and like this. Then I'm going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam on each of those. We'll open it up, press it, and then we'll sew the two halves together, and that will be our quarter square triangle pinwheel block. Let's go ahead and sew. We're going to go ahead and stitch our quarter square triangle pinwheel blocks together. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to iron one seam one direction and the other seam for the bottom half of the block going the other direction. That way when I put them together and sew them, I'll be able to nest the seams in the center. You can see here that I've pressed the seams. This is the top section of the block. I pressed the seam going that direction. This is the bottom half of the block. I've pressed the seam going that direction. So the last thing I need to do is put these together. I've lined them up so that the two seams nest right next to each other. They almost lock in place. And I'm going to pin on each side of the seam and then pin farther down the block as well. That keeps it stable and accurate while I sew. Okay, here's the pinwheel block. The last thing I'll do is press the seam. I'm going to actually press the seam open because that will help this center bulk be reduced and the block to lay more flat. I'm going to go ahead and iron this center seam. I'm going to iron it open, and I'm going to start it with my fingers just to encourage it to go the way I need it to go. And then I can use the nose of the iron to help it along. The center seam, you might have to really give it a good, maybe a shot of steam, really press hard. If your other seams get out of alignment, just give them a quick press back to where they need to go. Then iron the front side. And then the last thing we'll do is square up the block before we add the churn dash borders for this particular pattern. For your pattern, you may not have a border on it. This may be just a block that you want to include in your quilt, but you will want to square up the block to the dimensions called for in your pattern. In a moment, I'll come back and show you the completed block, which includes the churn dash borders for this particular quilt. This is the A Quilting Life block of the month for February 2022. It is a traditional block used in many, many sorts of quilts, so I hope this video was helpful. I'll come right back with the finished block. And here is my completed Quarter-Square Triangle Pinwheel block, also known as an Hourglass Pinwheel block, as I'm sewing it for the A Quilting Life Block of the Month for February 2022. It includes the churn dash borders. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and tell a friend. Visit my blog and shop at dconedesigns.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.